Welcome back to PodX. This is me, Ayush, Majithia, your host. Our guest for today is a man that needs no introduction. He's an entrepreneur, author, speaker, and so much more. He inspires millions of people daily, and I've been trying to have him on my podcast for more than 1.5 years. And I'm really excited we could finally make this happen. And more than anything, I've spent a lot of my time watching his videos and had so much of learning from him. And I'm excited to learn more from him on a one-on-one conversation while sharing this with all of y'all. And Ankur Sir, thank you so much for joining. It's really amazing having you.
Thank you so much, Ayush. Thanks a lot for having me on your podcast. And I must congratulate you on your persistence, because that has definitely shaped up my life in a meaningful manner. So I see that in a lot of people and get inspired by it. And you certainly showed it to absolutely different level by continuously making sure that for 1.5 years, you stayed top of mind, and you called me quite often, you sent an email quite often, and it's such a joy that this is finally happening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So actually, a lot of people have told me that the reason why most of them have said yes to me is because I was persistent, and it was kind of also like some of them have a barrier to see if a person is really serious. That is why they say no the first time, they say no the second time, and then they find that this person is actually serious. Then they give that person an opportunity. So I wanted to ask you this, since we started with persistence, I want to ask you if you could tell us some examples of how persistence defined your life as it is today.
I think that the two parts to it, and it manifests in one of my favorite quotes of all times, which is, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. We all hesitate to ask, and that's just the first step. But in case we are rejected for whatever reasons, the percentage of people who would ask again is infinitely small, because there's ego that comes in. There is this sense of identity crisis that creeps in. There is a sense of, let's say, what the world has thrown on you or thrust upon you as a decision that creeps in. And that is paralyzing for a lot of people. And I feel that people who can ask one more time and perhaps one last time are the ones who certainly stand a far higher chance of making it happen. And my life is a large part about making things happen just by asking. For example, I remember when, as early as if you consider that as early, but in 2015, which is about 7 years back, I was running Groupon in India, and that was a really nice, cushy job. It paid you immensely well. You were part of a global setup. You're part of the leadership team, and so on. But there was this kida in me of wanting to make things happen greater than what I was sitting on or was held responsible for. And I then went to Groupon, and I said, I think India has a far greater opportunity than you can perhaps service. And I understand why you can't service that. But I feel that I can do a far greater job. And I would love to buy the Groupon India business from you and make it independent. And their first reaction was, sorry, what are you talking about? You are 100% subsidiary of a publicly listed company listed in the US. This thing has never happened before. I was like, yeah, it hasn't happened before, but that's not the reason why it shouldn't happen in the first place. And it took almost 9 months of being persistent, of going back and forth in an intensely hard paperwork and deal making process. And it finally happened, where we bought Groupon, India business from Groupon, made that into Nearby, still continues to run. And that was just such a great example for me of proposing something which is audacious in the first place, but then persisting with it to eventually see the outcome.
So it's a really exciting thing. And I find this super interesting and fascinating also, because I'll tell you this, the quote which you spoke about, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. I read it first when I was in 8th grade. So I joined Instagram when I was in 8th grade the first time. And, it was very interesting. I started following these motivational pages back then. And I'll tell you this, and that's the first time I actually read the story. I read the post saying, if you never ask, the answer will always be no. And I'll tell you this also, another interesting thing, by joining Instagram early and following these motivational pages, the word hustle, people didn't know what it meant in India back then.
Yeah.
Because I remember using it in class. I was like, I just remember learning a new word. First, I had to Google it the first time because I thought it meant hassle, and that person didn't type it properly. Because the quote which I read was, the dream is free, the hustle is sold separately. So I thought he meant hassle.
Oh,
And I had to Google it, and I realized hustle is an actual word. And then in class, I realized not a lot of people knew it and all. So I started with these motivational pages and then outgrew that. But I think you have an even more interesting story. The way you went and bought Groupon India and expanded it, I feel you've done a great job in India. So
that's awesome, man. I love that story.
okay, so I wanted to come to you now about the most exciting part of your career, which is like I would say began over the last 2 years, which is your content creation journey, where you've just blown up suddenly. Like now, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know you 2 years back, and it is amazing about how many followers you've amassed, how amazing content that you're putting out. So what are your thoughts on your journey of the content creation
just,
one?
just a massive sense of gratitude, Ayush. Massive sense of gratitude. I don't think I nearly deserve to be where I am, and it's all massive amount of luck, because frankly my content creation journey coincided with COVID happening. People had a lot of time on their hands. They were stuck at home. They didn't know what to do with their time, and here I was creating content that in some way would have resonated with them, which is yielding the results. But frankly, any other period or any other interval of time, the same thing would not have created the kind of impact that it has in the last 2 years. And that's just wonderful, because it can't be planned. There's nothing that you can do to make it happen for you by design. It's just serendipity. You're blessed in that sense, and I feel that certainly for myself. The other overwhelming feeling is this massive sense of humility, because I didn't frankly expect the content to touch people in the way that it has. Every day I just wake up feeling I'm just a guy creating content. And when I create content, it's not from thin air. It's basically just my life. I'm 42 years of age, so I've had the luxury of having lived life and experienced massive highs, massive lows. And all of that is just in some way repurposed in the content that I share. So it's unlike curation that somebody would do, like you're doing a great job of curation, wherein you're bringing people and their experiences are then forming content for someone else to consume. There are people who are doing a commendable job around curation on various other platforms. But I speak from my experience. And because I speak from my experience, I have never taken myself seriously. So I don't take myself seriously and my experience seriously as well. It's like, yeah, I went through shit, and everybody goes through shit. So there's nothing that is really a big deal about it. But when I started sharing it, it was unbelievable how it touched people in ways that I couldn't have imagined. And to this date, there are wonderful men and women who write acknowledging that the content has helped them, the content has moved them. And I'm blown away by the stories that I get to experience on a daily basis, because I just find myself so privileged to be at the receiving end of so much. I think vulnerability is the right word, where people are genuinely opening up and sharing the dark phase that they're going through, sharing the difficult periods that they have experienced in life, and how something which I felt was trivial in my world lifted them up in a way that I could have never planned and never visualized. So that's the second overwhelming feeling. And I think the third one is that it's something that I realized very long back, but it's just a wonderful reaffirmation of the same realization that if you do something that you thoroughly enjoy, it will never seem like work. It will never seem like a drag. It will never feel like, oh my God, like Monday morning, I have to wake up again and do the same thing. I look forward to all of my content creation journey, all of my experiences where I interact with people, one-on-one, live sessions, whatnot, because all of that makes me get closer to understanding my own self a bit better through their experiences and their learnings and whatever it is that they have to share. So these three things: massive sense of gratitude, insane sense of humility with, oh my God, this trivial piece is reaching people in a way that I couldn't have imagined. And just this wonderful realization that if you do what you love, it will never seem like work.
And so I find it really fascinating the way you said, while you're recollecting a lot of your incidents to make this content, you're having a sense of self-reflection. So you know what mistakes that you've made in the past. You know what you don't have to repeat. But I'll tell you what's the best part for people who are viewing it. Like for me, when I look at your content, I know that, okay, these are the kind of mistakes Ankur Sir has made. This is the way it can be avoided and how I can implement it in my life and avoid that in the future. So it's like a very, a guru type of personality, I would say, that you have for all of us. And it's just amazing, I would say that.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Sir, but I wanted to also ask you this. You spoke about being vulnerable and being vulnerable and all. There's also a level of trust that is required, for someone to be vulnerable to someone else. So how do you think one can build a certain level of trust to have another person open up to them? Or how would you build trust in general?
That's a terrific question, Ayush. And I think one thing that has helped me shape up a large part of my life by design has been this core belief in trust, and this core belief that, especially in a trust deficient culture, which is ours, where we don't trust people easily and we are never told to trust people easily, if you operate with trust and you're able to build trust in others, you have a superpower that very few things can supersede. And for me, everything has centered around trust. I operate with trust and I want to trust people. That's the default engagement / interaction that I would want with people. And I would love for people to trust me. What I've realized over time, the shortest way that people can trust you is to see you consistent with every sense of emotion that they would feel themselves. What do I mean by that? We all know that nobody has their life sorted. Nobody has it supremely awesome all the time. Everyone goes through shit. Everyone goes through ups and downs and ups and downs. And when we see somebody being very comfortable with those ups and downs journey, being very comfortable with sharing that, hey, you see me at this high, but I was here at this low as well, and be very accepting of themselves in that mode and in that journey, you begin to trust that person. Because one, it's intensely hard to be that person in public. Two, it is acutely harder to be consistent with being that person and that identity. And three, it is severely damaging to somebody's mental makeup if the only thing that they're talking about is their success and never the failure that got them to that success. And I believe that that's the only ammunition and tool that I have. I have gone through so much in my life, and I'm so comfortable with sharing all of that with people that it just, in my opinion, helps people gravitate towards me because they're like, yaar, iski zindagi to hamare jaisi hi hai. Like, hame lagta tha iski zindagi puri sorted hai, and this guy has never done anything wrong in life, but clearly a lot of things have happened. And I love the fact that I can relate to whatever this person is sharing with me. And he has been doing that for donkey's years. It's not that aaj views engagement ke liye wo kuch bol raha hai. He's actually been repeating this to the point where I know about this even before it started. And that, like, there's so many people who keep saying me, yaar, aapka wo lost at 24 wala story na ab ho gaya bas. We know you were lost at 24, so you can stop. And like, I wouldn't, because that's a reality of my life. You're asking me, almost hinting that, can I change my life? I can't. So the only thing I have is either I don't share it, which I don't want to do, I want to share it. Or two is change the story, which I can't because it is my life.
That makes a lot of sense, being authentic and showing yourself out there. So I have this trick. I have this thing which I use actually also. I just wanted to add it as a point, which is opening up to another person first. So what happens is when two people are having a conversation, one of the ways to build a strong level of trust is by opening up first to them. So you tell them a small part of your life by opening up to them, and you will see them sharing a similar experience that they've had, or they will talk about that part in their life. What role does it play for them? So if you, like, suppose you're talking about your parents, about what they mean to you or how close you are to them and all, you will find the other person doing the same thing. And slowly, once you open up piece by piece, you see the other person opening up. And that's how I feel one way of building trust is. So that is how I manage to build trust with a lot of people. And second is asking for advice. Because I'll tell you how this works is you go to someone asking for advice, and that person thinks in their mind that, okay, this person trusts me with my opinion. He thinks I'm doing the right job. And that is another way of building trust, I would say.
You're so right. You're absolutely right. And for your age, very wise.
Thank you, sir. But so have you gone asking for advice, or what is one of the best advice that you've received?
Yeah, my best advice was around trust. It was my first experience working in a professional setup where I was doing something that I was not liking, and that's why my 100% was not in it, and the manager could see through it. And my manager suddenly then had to review my work, not knowing whether there would be any mistake in it or not. So even if the work was completely accurate and error-free, they still didn't know, because there had been enough instances in the past where there were a lot of errors, and I'd quote unquote allowed them to creep in. And I remember this one-on-one that I was having with my manager where he said, "Hey, Ankur, it doesn't matter how smart you are if I can't trust you." And that just hit like a bolt, because you would often think that if you're smart, you can get away with a lot of things. But that was when I realized that trust is far more important than anything else. And if you cannot build yourself in a manner that people can trust you, then it frankly doesn't matter how much money you have, how much IQ you're born with, how much capability or hard work you bring to the table. People don't trust you. And that's why they will never trust you with your work.
I'm going to go a bit off topic over here, sir, because I noticed something really cool. So, you spoke about it that you don't change your life story like 2 minutes back. I want to prove it that it's true, because I was just listening to your podcast with Varun like 1 hour back. And that is like he asked a similar question, not the same question. And this is the example which you gave. And I really love the way that nothing has changed, because some people will have a different answer in different interviews. And this is like the point which is proving that what you say is what is real.
It's just, it is life, right? So you can't change that. I'm glad you observed that. Thank you.
And so I wanted to ask you this though. You've seen so many ups and downs. So how do you define success? Because for some people it is fame, for some people it is money, for some people it's happiness. So what is your definition of success?
My definition of success is very clear in my head, Ayush, and it's taken a long while for me to get there, which is being able to do whatever I want to do without caring what the world thinks of me. And that, I believe, is true freedom. And that for me is my success. I wish to be free from everybody's expectation, including that of mine. And that's why I don't set goals and targets for myself as well. I would love to live life in a way that I'm genuinely happy, that I do whatever I want to do. I have the freedom and the capability and the privilege to do whatever I want to do. And I'll just see where it takes me. And as long as I can be myself without caring what the world thinks of me, that for me is success.
But how did you reach this definition of success? And how did you also manage to find your purpose in life?
I think I reached this definition of success after living the exact opposite of it, which is success as defined by the world. Bangla, Gadi, Shan, Shaukat, all of these lovely society-imposed metrics of success. I chased that for the longest time. Growing up, I wanted to be a space scientist and I wanted to go to NASA, settle in the US. I chased all of that only to realize it's not something that made me happy. I chased a corporate job only to realize that wasn't meant for me. I chased money as an entrepreneur only to realize that even if you get it, it doesn't change anything for you materially. I then, through my own journey, figured that the only thing that makes me really happy in life is to be able to do whatever I want to do at any point of time. And I'm not a very unstructured person in the sense that I'll be very random in what I want to do. There's always a logical flow in my head of why I would do what's next in my life. But I also don't plan that in advance because I love serendipity playing a role. Could I have imagined even 5 years back that I would be here today as a content writer, as an author, as whatever is it that I'm doing right now? No, Absolutely not. But was I creating content 5 years back? Yes. I've been creating content for decades now. And people only listened up in the last 2 years because I dedicated myself to it, as against doing it on the side because I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that's where serendipity has taken me. If I wasn't creating content for the time that I have been creating content, it's quite likely I would not have chosen to dedicate myself to content creation as actively as I'm doing right now. And that for me is just a beautiful way of how life unfolds for you.
I think that's amazing. I really hope that all of us can manage to find our way of purpose and meaning, and also what success means to us. Because right now, everyone, I think in my age, I feel also everyone has that definition of success, like you said, of money, power, fancy house, fancy cars. And I feel it's so ingrained in all of us because of school. Like we're all taught we need to get a high paying job. We need to do something that makes a lot of money. And even for me right now, it is that same definition of having a lot of money. So I hope on the way, all of us do manage to find what it means to us, because I feel it means different to everyone else.
Yeah, so true.
So I wanted to ask you this really, really exciting part. I've watched all the series videos of this, but what are your thoughts on networking?
Yeah, I feel networking for the purpose of networking is always a failed attempt. I know of so many people who would go to conferences, who would create a persona on social media, try to get into people's inboxes, try to get into people's mind. And it almost always fails because your sole purpose of networking is to network. I believe that the best way of networking is to not want to network. Just go out and create connections where you would want to help, where you don't expect any help from the other person. You perhaps don't even know how the other person can help you. And at some point of time in the future, because you've built that authentic connection, because you never sought to take and were always happy to give, if you ever get to a point where you do need some help, people are more than happy to help. And you'll be surprised at how many people will raise their hands to help you, because you have never built that relationship with the purpose of asking. And that, I believe, is just very powerful. It takes time. It's a very slow process. And that's why I can imagine most people not wanting to sign up for it. But should you wish to build something for the long term and truly see the power of a network work for you, the best way to do that is not be in the business of networking.
So you would say it's building human connection with someone, like a strong bond.
Always works. Always works.
That is something which I need to try. So sir, I wanted to ask you this last thing, which is your thoughts on mentorship. Because you've been mentoring so many people. You yourself must have had mentors. And how does it work? How does one get a mentor? And what is the best part about having it?
So I've spoken about this often, and I do believe that having mentors in life is a fascinating thing one can have, and you will be very lucky to have the right kind of mentors. And there are three things that I figured along my journey of how mentoring should be looked at least the way that I looked at it, and it worked for me. Number one, don't look for mentors who are very far away from you in terms of experience, because the way that they see the world is going to be dramatically different from the way you see it, where things that are not so obvious to you will be so obvious to them that they will never state it in front of you. And you will always feel like a dumb person who doesn't have the intellectual capacity to process what they just said. So having somebody, like if you ask people, hey, you want to be an entrepreneur? Awesome. Who would you want as a mentor? And people will suddenly name Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Vijay Shekhar Sharma, Sachin Bansal. And that is such a wrong way of looking at mentoring. Because if you suddenly look at those individuals as your potential mentors, they are at such a far distance from you that things which are so obvious to them, they will never state it in front of you, and you will be left feeling you're not intellectually inclined. That's number one. Number two, Don't look for one mentor in your life, because that's just too much pressure and in an unfair manner on just one person. You need to think of mentors as experts in a field or in an area, so that you trust them with their judgment in that area or that field. I have mentors for money. I have mentors for relationships. I have mentors for startups. I have mentors for investing. I have mentors for XYZ. These are people whose judgment I rely on, whose thoughts are things that I take in high regard. And I am then spreading myself in the repertoire of mentors that I seek guidance from, as against just trying to have one. And then finally, don't look for mentors who think and behave the same way as you do, because they then most likely are going to say the same things that you already know. What you want to do is seek mentors who think very differently from you, who have a very different perspective from you, who are always trying to either challenge the way that you think or present a whole new way of thinking from what you're used to. When you bring these three things together, looking at mentors who are very close to your experience and not too far away, looking at multiple mentors in different domains, and then looking at mentors who are very different in the way that they think from how you think, that I believe is a sound mentoring model that should work for everybody.
I think that is something which I will definitely look into and try, because I am constantly looking for people that I can learn from, people who can give me the right advice. Or I wouldn't say right advice exactly. There's no right or wrong. What is right for me, who can provide me with that guidance. So I think that is a really helpful thing for me. So, so I wanted to ask you this before ending. What is your last advice for anyone who's watching or listening to this podcast?
I don't have any advice, because any advice without context is not to be taken. And that is the only advice that I would give. Don't take advice that comes without context, because then that's platitude. And that applies for the lowest common denominator, may not apply to you. That'll be my only advice.
Thank you so much for joining in, sir. It was amazing having you. I learned a lot, and I'm really looking forward to having you in the future again, a couple of years later. So yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Ayush. All the best with everything. And I'm excited for you, man.